distinction of enough or sufficiency is different than abundance. It's a way of seeing the world. It's a way of seeing yourself. It's not just there is enough. It's I am enough. And the deficit relationship we have with money and life has seeped into our psyche, and we actually believe we are not enough.
Hello there, beloved USU family. I'm just grinning ear to ear. Today's guest is someone I have wanted to have on here for such a long time, and I'm so grateful, Lynn. Today we are going to get to meet and know beloved Lynne Twist, who is the best-selling author of The Soul of Money and also other works, and just such a bright light in this planet. And I think this conversation, we did an intention. I almost wish we were recording it to really let everyone know, as always, may this conversation bless you, may it empower you and help you to come away with a new relationship around finances, wealth, money, everything to do with empowerment. And Lynn, I'm so grateful you're here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Julie. It's a delight to be on your show and to meet you.
Thank you. And I'm going to just give a quick shout out to our mutual friend, Eileen
Yeah.
Robertson Hamra, who put us together. I love Eileen. And also to Danette, who created the Illuminate Film Festival, because that's where I first learned of your work like
Mhm.
7 or 8 years ago. So,
Yeah.
so grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, look at the great connectors that bring us together. Thank
Great
goodness for them.
connectors. Yes, the lights. We're all lights. And I think, what I would love to start with, for those who may know you or don't know your story, what initially sparked your deep exploration into the soul of money? Like, how did you come about writing this book and writing about this topic? I know that's a big question, so I'll let you pull it from whatever thread feels right for you.
Well, thank you for asking that. Uh, I've been very, very fortunate to work on big global issues, and for many years, I was involved with and an executive with the Hunger Project. The Hunger Project is dedicated to ending world hunger by empowering hungry people to find their own self-reliance and self-sufficiency. And in the years that I was working for the Hunger Project, I developed a fundraising methodology that was unique and was really about not only the people suffering from hunger and starvation and malabsorptive hunger and seasonal hunger and malnutrition, but also the hunger that we all have for meaning in our own lives. The front and back of the hand of hunger, they're related. So the front part of the hand of hunger is physical hunger, and the back side of the hand of hunger is the hunger for meaning, to make a difference with our lives, the hunger for to matter, that's in the more affluent world. And we really, I say, I can only assert this, that these two hungers are related. In fact, they're one. And so our fundraising methodology for the Hunger Project was really transformational, to transform people's relationship with money so they weren't not confused about what money is, that it can actually be the current or the currency. That's why it's called a currency, because it's a current of love and commitment, and could connect with people in circumstances other than the ones that we are lucky enough to either earn or be born with, and begin a relationship that would be critical and vital to us all understanding who we are and what's possible for life. And so that fundraising methodology, which was really like little Soul of Money workshops that raised money for the Hunger Project, became well known and developed a lot of distinctions in our relationship with money that that came to be unique and useful enough that several publishers, literary agents, people who know about books, which is not me, approached me and asked me to write a book. And I said, I can't do that. I'm an activist. I'm a pro-activist. I call myself a pro-activist and an activist for, not against. So I'm standing for a big vision. And I know there's stuff in between me and that big vision, but I'm not against that stuff. I'm about dismantling it with respect and honor, so that we can get to the vision that we all hold for a flourishing life for all. So, as a proactivist, I said, I don't have time to write a book. I don't know how to write a book. I don't, yikes, that's not my thing. But one of the publishers was really persistent and connected me with a literary agent who helped me find a collaborative writer. So it was then something that I could do, because what I did was, just like I'm talking to you, I talked to my delicious, wonderful colleague, Teresa Barker, who's a collaborative writer. I talked to her every day for 2 years, from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. mostly, before the day started, no matter where I was in the world. And she recorded what I said and then helped organize it into what turned out to be a book called The Soul of Money. And that's how that happened. It was really rooted, it still is rooted in my insights that people living in conditions of poverty are not poor. Their circumstances are poor, but they are not. They're whole and complete people living in poor circumstances. But we call them poor as if there's something wrong with them, when in fact they are some of the strongest, most resilient, most creative, most innovative people on earth. They have to be. And that those of us who are living in circumstances that are in excess of what we need are often somewhat confused by having more than we need. And it almost produces a wish for even more of what we don't need, which has become a kind of consumer nightmare for our world, and also for all of us who have way more stuff than we need. So all of this came together in the book, The Soul of Money, and it made a big difference to people, and that's how it all got started.
I love this story, Lynn. And I think one of the things, just for those, I know there are many listeners who either want to write a book or have thought about writing a book. And just first of all, to say there's all kinds of ways to do it. It doesn't have to be the traditional pen to paper. I was listening and I'm like, that's brilliant for those of us that are verbal or don't think we have time or that background. So just love the organic way that this book came out and about, and the commitment. Obviously, I can just feel your purposeful heart in spending 2 hours every day for 2 years to really get that out of you into the world so that it could be shared with the world. And something you just said, I was, one of the questions I had was around, I know you've done a lot of work with international development and fundraising, and that there's this misconception around people who around money and social change and impact, and I started to hear it kind of come to the surface, and maybe to kind of lean into that, because I think for many of us listening, I'm not saying everyone, where we have so much and we have these labels, like you said, I love what you said. That touched my heart. Nobody, no matter what their net worth is, nobody is actually poor. That doesn't exist, because they're whole and complete and of spirit of love. But I would love to hear from you some of those misconceptions you've seen around money, around social change, around impact.
Well, I put this in a framework called the toxic myths of scarcity. And really, the core of my Soul of Money book message is to examine our own consciousness around money, because we have a consciousness that's been given to us by the culture that we have adopted as if it's our own, but it's not. The culture that we live in is a culture that promotes scarcity. Scarcity meaning that there's not enough to go around and someone's always going to be left out. And that's just not only not true, but it creates behaviors that are inconsistent with our humanity. So if we actually believe, even unconsciously, that there's not enough to go around of anything, and someone's always going to be left out, then it's our job, we think, to accumulate way more than we need for ourselves and our own, whoever we consider our own to be, so that we're not among those who are left out, because somebody's always going to be left out. And the job is to make sure you and yours, whoever you consider that to be, your country, your ethnic group, your family, your economic class, your club, your tribe, is not among those that are left out. So it immediately creates an either or. It immediately creates an us and a them. Just that notion that there's not enough to go around. That's the first, what I call toxic myth in the great lie of scarcity. I'm calling it a lie, and I'll tell you why. The second toxic myth is more is better. So you think that more of anything and everything is better. More sweaters, more shoes, more cars, more houses, more square feet in your house, more this, more that. That's led us to a society that's just overwhelmed with stuff and accumulating more all the time and producing more all the time, and way beyond what we need. And doing it in a way that more and more people are in this category of being left out. But it's not true that there's not enough to go around. That's a myth. So this more is better mania, obsession, addiction has us, kind of um, drowning in stuff. Even people who don't seem to have many meager resources still have, stuff that they don't need, lots of it. Um, and it's, if you think about the biggest industries and some of the fastest growing industries in the world, are waste and storage. Waste is just this huge problem now. And storage is like, what is storage? Just think about it. Why would we need storage? I mean, really. So storage is a fast growing industry, one of the fastest growing, because we're just insanely accumulating stuff. And I think about the homeless people that I see in San Francisco where I live, and I'm sure they're in Baltimore too, and they're pretty much everywhere on earth. And we're not building houses for them. No, we're building houses for the stuff that we can't fit in our houses, and that's called storage. It's an indictment on the human family. That's the second toxic myth, more is better. And the third toxic myth is that's just the way that it is. There's nothing you can do about it. And first toxic myth, there's not enough, which is a belief system. Second toxic myth, more is better, which is a belief system. And the third toxic myth is that's just the way that it is. And you have to go along, you have to buy in, so to speak. And those three toxic myths hold a mindset in place that's literally choking us, killing us, and destroying the natural world. And the third toxic myth, that's just the way that it is, there's nothing I can do about it, is the source of, I think, resignation, depression, mental illness, suicide, horrendous mental illness, because we have been, quote unquote, sold that money and more of it, things and more of it, accumulation and more of it will lead to some sort of satisfaction and happiness, but it's the opposite. It actually leads to kind of clogging our capacity to experience the beauty of the world. So that whole methodology, that whole way of looking at things, that whole kind of toxic way of looking at life, that there's not enough to go around and somebody's always going to be left out, has us as a human family believing that there's a way. There's no such place. You can't throw anything away, really. There's no such location as away. It goes into landfills or the ocean or rivers or, it goes where no one wants it to go. Just because we don't want it anymore, we think there's an away, and there isn't. So all of this is part of the Soul of Money message, and the radical surprising truth, which, have to get some good news here, is this absolutely profound, incredible realization, revelation, recognition is there's enough. Enough. There is sufficient resources for everyone, everywhere on this planet to have a healthy and productive life. As Gandhi said, there's absolutely profoundly enough for our need. but not for our greed. And this distinction of enough or sufficiency is different than abundance. It's a way of seeing the world. It's a way of seeing yourself. It's not just there is enough. It's I am enough. And the deficit relationship we have with money and life has seeped into our psyche, and we actually believe we are not enough. And when you start to really unpack that and realize you and I are enough exactly the way we are, that generates an expression of generosity and gratitude, which is the key to happiness. So that's a kind of a brief summary of what the Soul of Money courses that I lead and the Soul of Money book teaches. Talking about it does create some space, but going through a real deep dive and series of practices and exercises to realize you are enough, you have enough, there is enough, shifts your relationship with the entire world and could be the key to the future that we hope is coming our way, a future where everyone can flourish, everyone and everything.
So beautifully said. And I think we will get into these three toxic myths and how to bust them and how to shift that. I have questions for you on that. I think what's so powerful, Lynne, as you're speaking, I want to share a quick story that happened today. And I was preparing for this interview, and it's just so funny. It's funny how life happens. And I'm like, oh, look at that scarcity thinking, Julie. I was at Trader Joe's just getting the things that, we're recording around the holidays. And for some reason, I use, this is kind of a funny, silly story, but I use apple cider vinegar. I drink it, I wash my fruit, and I got a thing of it, and something said, oh, you should probably get like 5 more of them. Like you just should stock up on them. And I thought, isn't that funny? That thought is so funny. That's a scarcity thought. Like they have plenty here. We don't need to stock up on apple cider vinegar. And I heard a higher voice say, put it back. One is enough. You will get more. And I was just thinking, and it seeps in to everything, right? And so I've been in reading your book and getting ready for today and thinking about it. There's also a documentary on Netflix right now that's all about buying and over consuming. And I was watching, thinking about what we were talking about. And this, it's baked into our world and especially our society and culture that more is better, as you said. And I really believe what you're saying. This is a spiritual inner path. Understanding the outer is going to reflect the inner. And I saw it today. I mean, I was laughing because I'm like, oh my gosh, I really thought I felt that pull. Apple cider vinegar. We're not even talking about toilet paper. We're talking about, this is not like a staple, but in my brain. So I saw it and I was like, oh, it's still there a little bit. Okay. All right. I'm so glad you and I are talking today. I saw it creep up, and I this feels so important right now because I know anybody listening to the show, like attracts like, and we have, I light leaders, light workers, people, individuals that are soulful that, if you're tuning in, I know want to make an impact, want to be of service, want to reduce, the imprint we're leaving, want to be more connected and conscious and do the spiritual inner work. So I'm so excited. I feel like we're at this like well of wisdom with you. So thank you, because I have so many questions and I really love the work you're doing. Before we get into some of these, like how do you change your mindset? And I know you talk about sufficiency mindset and all these other beautiful ways of shifting. I wanted to ask about, you mentioned in the book the sacred nature of money, and I thought it might be helpful to kind of start with what that means, like to you personally, and in terms of interacting with money, with wealth, with just understanding it. I loved this so much, so I thought starting with the sacred nature would be really soothing and helpful for anyone listening to like sink their teeth into that.
Well, I think money is kind of innocent. It's an energy, it's an agreement, it's a conversation, it's a symbol on a computer screen. It's when we have cash, which is so rare now because people sometimes don't even take it. Um, it's a it's an invention, and we forget because it's become so central in our culture that we invented it. That it's not part of the natural world. Money does not fall from trees. Pennies do not fall from heaven. Money doesn't grow on trees, sorry, and doesn't pennies do not fall from heaven. We invented it. It is a human-made phenomenon. We invented it, and now we're at the effect of our own creation. And we invented money. Some money historians say 3,500 to 4,500 years ago as a cultural stability that was designed to ensure, as communities got larger and larger after agriculture, that when you didn't know everybody, you had a way of remembering who owes what to who. So before communities got too large, you would give me, if I was needed shoes for my children, or if I were, let's say, the shoemaker, the cobbler, I went to you because I saw that your shoes needed repair. And I would say, may I repair your shoes? Because I need a pig and I can repair your children's shoes and yours, or make new shoes for your mother and father in exchange for a pig. And you would say, fine, that would be great, but we actually don't need shoes. But we do need corn. And I noticed that the corn farmer has terrible shoes. So try him or her. And we go to the corn farmer. Yes, if you can fix my shoes, I'll give you corn. And then I get the corn and I give it to you, and you give me a pig. So that's really how everything worked. Everybody supported everybody with whatever it is they had. And it was all a gift, or you could say an exchange economy. Then it became so complicated when there was more than 100 families in a community. Um, we invented this thing called money. And the idea was to make sure that everybody was taken care of. That was the point, to make sure that everybody everywhere in the community had what they needed and wanted. So the original purpose of money was to make sure everybody was taken care of, had what they needed, wanted, and was cared for by the whole. Then banking was invented, and banking is not a bad or a good thing, but what got invented when banking got invented was interest. And interest in many religions, actually, in Islam and even in the Christian religion, I think, is considered usury, is somewhat, questionable. Even in Islam, I think they don't even allow it because it's making money with money. It's not producing anything. It's not me doing something for you and you doing something for me. So interest got invented, and then interest is a simple invention, but then things got more and more complicated. Now we have derivatives of derivatives of derivatives, and who knows? Now, unless you have a financial advisor, you can't even understand what people are talking about when they get into the investment world. So we started to get hijacked by our own invention of money. And it stopped meaning what it meant originally, which was to facilitate you and I having what we needed and wanted. Now, money is used to dominate, to control, to crush, actually, to marginalize huge swaths of people. And that was never the intention of money. So now it's almost like it rules us rather than we have it. It's almost like we become a slave to our own creation. And we used to be called citizens, and that was a beautiful name for a human being because it means he or she who's responsible for the community or the state or the province or the country or even the world. To be a global citizen is a noble thing. But now we have devolved, even in labeling ourselves, we've gone from being consumers, citizens, he or she who's responsible for the state or the country or the community, to consumers. And the word consumer means he or she who takes, depletes, diminishes, or destroys. And that's what we now call ourselves, because that's what we're doing. And that's how we're marketed to, and that's how we're, even in our political system in almost every single country, we're sized up by our consumer patterns. So we're treated like consumers. We're manipulated as consumers. Um, the whole culture is organized around consuming, around taking, around diminishing, around destroying, around extracting, around depleting. And that is now what money is in service to. And no one meant that in the beginning. So we've lost our way with money, but we can recapture the original intention. We can relook. It's hard to do it because the culture tells you everything else, but we can realize what I call the principle of sufficiency, which is this: if you let go of trying to get more of what you don't really need, which is what we're brainwashed to want more of, it frees up all the energy that's tied up in that chase to turn and pay attention to what you already have. When you pay attention to what you already have, when you nourish what you already have, when you make a difference with what you already have, and when you share what you already have, it expands before your very eyes. It's the opposite of what we think. So I'll say that again. If we let go of trying to get more of what we don't really need, it frees up oceans of energy that's all tied up in the chase to turn and pay attention to what we already have. When we nourish what we already have, when we love what we already have, and when we share what we already have, it expands before our very eyes. And that's a way of living that's satisfying, fulfilling, nourishing, and creates the world we want, is of service to the world we want. And it sounds theoretical and esoteric, but it actually works on a day-to-day basis, even with time, which we think is so scarce. If you make a difference with your time, it expands. It seems like, you know, you go to a conference that's very, very well done, and you've been there for 2 days. At the end of it, you think you've been there for 2 weeks, because you've been totally and completely present with everybody who's there. So there's so much to learn from our craziness, our dysfunction around money that frees us up in all areas of our life. So it's a handle, almost a way to walk into a whole world of transformation, to rethink, reimagine, and recreate our relationship with money.
Mm. As I'm listening, it feels to me like a call to action to all of us. One of the things, even I love what you said. Understanding we create our world with our words, with what we're using in language, and for all of us to really even look at like going back to the citizen word versus consumer, because as you're talking about consumer and you're defining it, I'm someone who loves words. It's my love language. So as you're explaining, and for those who love words, like just understanding even the power of, it didn't feel good in my body hearing you say it when you talked about citizen and taking responsibility. I do a lot in the world with A Course in Miracles as well. And I was feeling how consumer feels very ego based,
Mhm.
very, it gets out of love, it gets into fear, it gets into the lack. And maybe one of the things we can do is the way you identify yourself, not as a consumer, as a citizen, that could be a small, it just occurred to me, I'm going to look at that word for
Mhm.
myself. Um, I think this like enoughness. And then you talked about, giving and receiving is part of what I was hearing. As we give, it's kind of the opposite of what we think. It reminded me, Lynn, I did a yoga teacher training. I just love yoga and thought for fun, I'll teach it on the side. And a friend of mine who's a teacher as well, she went back to Nigeria to visit. I think her husband is from Nigeria. And she was saying, I asked her, I said, how did you feel about this trip and the visit and the land? And she said, Julie, the people that I met had so much less than we do and had so much more joy, so much more like generosity and giving. I was joking. I actually did a 23andMe and I had 1% of my DNA was Nigerian. I'm like, maybe I need to go. And she's like, you will be taken in as a sister. And I'm like, all right, well, I need to, that's going to be on the bucket list. But I was almost brought to tears. I was just listening to her story about visiting and what she experienced. And in that area, that culture where there's no way the people she was visiting had the same amount of consumption that we do and seemed lighter and happier, more joyful and more free and more energetic. And I'm like, who doesn't want those things? So I thought that was
Right.
interesting.
Exactly. Well, people who have very little, and maybe very little is not even the right way to put it, just less than we do. They have what they need and not way more than that. They have the room and the space then to deepen and derive their satisfaction from relationships. And we're now so isolated, even through the technology that's supposed to connect us, and it does. I mean, you and I are not in the same city and not even on the same side of the country, and here we are having an intimate conversation. So that's the beauty of technology, but it also is that you're alone in your room wherever you are. I'm alone in my room, and I can be alone in this room all day long, all week long, all month long, and not go outside. uh, sometimes, or even forget to eat. And we have created such a culture, and also the algorithms that give us an echo chamber of our own demise. We're isolating ourselves from each other, whereas communities like the one your friend visited probably had to rely on each other for food, for livelihood, for music, for water, for firewood. I mean, they had to connect with each other for their survival, but they wanted to. And that's where the love and the fulfillment and the joy, you're not happy and joyful and celebrating all by yourself that often. I mean, every once in a while you have like a moment, but mostly it's with other people and with the win and collaboration and relationship that comes from being in a loving situation with other people. And we are missing that in our society so much now. It's just kind of heartbreaking. And I often refer to the deficit. The Congress is, I think, meeting today to extend for another, I don't know how many weeks, uh, because the deficit is so astronomical that we can't imagine that we can ever pay it. And I say it's an accurate reflection of a culture that puts no value on inner riches and all the value on outer riches that would go into such a deep and almost unconfrontable deficit. And our country is in horrendous debt. Um, and it's a mirror of the way we hold this mindset of scarcity that we have to accumulate because there's not enough to go around, and there's the fear that comes with that is crazy making. It's crazy making.
You know, the whole idea behind this being your USU, as you're talking, I feel like tears coming into my eyes to really this like loss of focusing on our inner riches. And so much of what this is about is for each and every human being that's tuning in to remember the inner richness. I love that wording is beautiful, and that the perfect whole completeness of each and every one of us, no matter what your bank account says. And I am curious, what can we do, Lynn, to start this healing process, this transformation with our relationship? I'm going to say with money, and then I have a feeling you're going to also bring in with ourselves. But for those, I know in talking about money in the past, for some, there's a real struggle, right? Might feel like there's not enough, or that push to overconsume, or the keeping up with the Joneses, or whatever it is that's going on. I know as someone, as a parent of two kids getting ready to go to college, like that in itself, there's a lot in our world that because we've created this exchange of money that can seem very real, how do we heal and transform our relationship? Let's start looking at what can we do.
Well, I'll just say to make sure that people aren't confused, the distinction of enough or sufficiency is not an amount. And because we are so oriented towards amount and numbers and counting, uh, up and down, it's sometimes when I say enough, one thinks of, well, how much is that? And let me just say that I think that too. But what I really want us to consider is the experience, the state of being called enough, and how you find that, which we all know it's there, because when you see a newborn baby, or when you actually totally present to the sunset, or when you suddenly realize the moon is rising and it's this big orange beautiful thing, or when you see a baby bird that's just learning to fly. We have these moments where we're totally present, and there's no lack. There's no wanting more or less, or it's all gone. And it's really just that's what I'm talking about when I say enough. And how to practice in a way that you start to realize that that is a place you can reside is through gratitude. Um, no matter what's happening, if you can find a way to be grateful for it, it changes the very water you're swimming in and the experience you're having. So gratitude practices are, I think, a really important part of finding our way from more is better and we need more of everything to the experience of enough. Even when you're short college tuition and you're not so sure you can make your next mortgage payment, to be in the presence of gratitude for the house that you have. Perhaps you're a little bit nervous about the next mortgage payment, but you're in this amazing place called your home. Or you have these two beautiful daughters who are preparing to go to, I don't know if they're daughters. I can't remember if they're daughter and a son, and both daughters. Okay, daughter and son, these two children who are preparing to go to college. What a privilege to raise these beings and then give them the chance and the opportunity to be educated in a way that they can really make something of themselves. All of the obvious things that we just step over because they're there are an opportunity to be in the space of what Brother David Stendhal-Rost, a great teacher of mine, says, the great fullness of life. To be grateful for the great fullness of life. That you're in a warm place. I'm sitting in my home in a warm place and it's cold outside. I have this, fuzzy sweater on that makes me feel so good. I love to be in green. I love talking to you. Your smile, your relationship with our friend Eileen, your love for your children, your enthusiasm for life. What a privilege to spend these next few minutes with you. So that way of approaching life actually generates an experience of enoughness or leads you to that place. And when you feel that you have enough, when you know that you are enough, the world starts to change around you. And miracles do actually occur. One of your kids gets the scholarship they dreamed of, or the mortgage payment is suddenly made possible by an incredible windfall with something that you forgot. Somebody owed you money and they remembered and they paid you back before you even asked them for it, etc. I mean, things start to validate and honor the great fullness of life. And I don't want to say that like it's a magic trick. You can't do it that way. It needs to be really authentic. Um, and the people in Nigeria that you referred to earlier, their happiness and joy and capacity to dance and celebrate and laugh comes from experiencing the great fullness of life. So they experience being in bounty when, in fact, if you did an assessment, they don't have enough money to buy another chicken. They're stretching the dinner to make it work for 10 people when they only have enough for three. All of that, you could look at their life that way and consider them, quote unquote, poor, when in fact they're as rich and fulfilled as anyone on earth. So it's not a trick, gratitude. It's an actual practice. Um, it's a um, it's a way of seeing the world. It's a school of blessings. And when we realize that our life has been given to us, that it actually, life itself is a gift, then we want to give it rather than use it to take. Um, so all of this sounds very theoretical and sort of like, oh yeah, she can easily say that. She's in a warm place with her green sweater in San Francisco. But I can tell you that it really, really works. It really works.
I love that use of words, the great, how
The
did you say that? The
gratefulness. Grateful means
gratefulness.
the gratefulness of life. Yeah.
Yeah. And, understanding again our perception. It's really our perception. And what you said earlier, it just kept, especially around the holiday time, actually all times, because there's always something going on, especially I know in the States, it's consumer, marketing and focus, and it leads, I think it can lead to such a feeling of depletion, but the opposite is when and I love what you were saying, when you really shift your perception and authentically, and that's important because we can't fake this. We can think about, this is what I've noticed, at least, Lynn, you have to tell me. I can think about what I'm grateful for, but when I start to actually feel it and like embody it, that's where I think you were talking about miracles. Things change. The inner shifts, the outer changes and mirrors that. And we cannot fake this. It's a really important piece that you just said. And so you talk, I know, about the power of giving and receiving and generosity. Would love to hear a little bit more about that because I think for this culture of, consumption and scarcity and lack, the way that has been portrayed, it can feel like I don't have enough to give. I don't, that like constriction when it's actually the opposite.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that there's two answers I have to your question. The first part is just to say that it is powerful to express your gratitude in language to another person. That really helps you feel it. And just to kind of divert for a moment to something that I think is useful to consider. I don't think we live in our lives. I don't think we live in our relationships. I don't think we live in our jobs or our world. I think we live in the conversation we have about our lives. I
Yes.
think we live in the conversation we have about our relationships. I think we live in the conversation we have about our jobs. I think we live in the conversation we have about our world. And we can't necessarily change the world or change the relationship or change our job, but we have absolute omnipotence over the conversation we have about our life. We have about our relationship. We have about our job. We have about the world. We have absolute total omnipotence over that. And that's really where we live. So if I can say, as the people in Nigeria probably that your friend visited, I'm so grateful for this lemon tree that's giving me 5 lemons. I'm so grateful to turn on the faucet and have clean and pure water come out. I'm so grateful up on the third floor of my house to have this little space heater that's just this amazing little thing that keeps me and the whole world warm. I can't even believe that. Um, and to express it, that's one thing. And then the second thing, and I can't remember your question now. You told me something and I was going to say something. I had
No,
something.
well, and I love what you're saying about we live in the conversation we create, which
Mm.
is why this conversation is so potent. I think this is why I was guided to do this work is because this is where we shift. And then the power of receiving, giving and receiving
Giving and
and being
receiving. That's it.
generous.
Okay.
Yeah.
So giving and receiving is so amazing when you really get into it. It's different than taking. Um, when you breathe, you cannot receive, you cannot give out more breath than you received. Like when you meditate, when you just for a moment breathe together, you breathe in, you breathe out. It's an expression of absolute perfect equanimity. If you take a deep breath, you have to let out a deep breath. You can't hold it. You can hold it for a while, but eventually it comes out. And so our breath is such a teacher. And since we're at a time where we're doing this conversation near the holidays where lots of giving and receiving takes place, but also lots of consuming of silly things. When you think about what people really want, like your children, maybe they want a pair of new blue jeans, or maybe they want a new iPhone, or maybe they want a new this or a new that, or a new car. They also want your time. They also want a card that says, I promise that we will do a camping trip alone together in the Sierras, just you and I, for one weekend. You tell me the weekend and I'll start setting it up. Or I promise, or I give you. One of the things I invite people to do for the holidays is to shop in the house. Shop in the house. What is something in your house that's been precious to you for years, but it's now time to pass it on? Is it an icon? Is it a little Buddha statue? Is it a sweater that you've loved? Is it something your mother made for you? Is it a what is it that you can shop in the house and give to somebody that will be so much more meaningful than you going out and buying something? Um, how can you give the gift of time? How can you give the gift of, um, uh, like my friend Sarah, she just moved, and I'm giving her a day of spending time organizing her cupboards. Um, she would like that way more than a housewarming present, which she'll probably stick in a closet, and it'll be another thing she has to figure out what to do with. Um, so that's about giving. On receiving, think about what you love to receive. I mean, it is nice to get a gift. I love gifts, physical gifts. At the same time, I get so many things that I really do not want from people that are trying so hard to be kind to me, giving me their pottery bowl, or making sure that they buy me, an extra bouquet of flowers on my birthday. I love that. I must say, I do love that. But at a certain point, I don't want more of that. I want their love. I want their attention. That's what children want. What children's love language is time from their parents. Time. That's their love language. So giving and receiving, to recalibrate that now in a world where we're over consuming and destroying the very life support system on which we depend. If you want to give a gift, um, perhaps it's a donation to the Heifer Project, which would pay for a cow that's given to a family that needs it in your name. Or how about a loan on Kiva, the wonderful micro lending site, in the name of someone? Or how about um, uh, taking them to the symphony, or buying tickets to go to the circus? Just rethinking what it means to give and receive, and what really, really matters to you, and what might really, really matter to the person you want to give something to. um, that is an expression of sufficiency. That is an expression of love. That is an expression of generosity that's generative rather than accumulative. So, those are some ideas about giving and receiving.
Absolutely beautiful. Love this idea of shopping in your house, and then the idea of giving of time, and of we all have different expertise, gifts, such beautiful ideas. And to the other thing I'm getting is that moment of pause to really bring awareness. You know, do I need this? What might serve even better? Is there a way I can give of what I do have? And it could be, it doesn't have to just be monetary. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I am
Mm.
curious, just before we wrap, I like to just ask a few fun questions, Lynn. Well, one would be, what advice would you give to your younger self now that is about money, about life? Like, what would that wisdom be if you could talk to your younger self in their 20s or whenever that might be? What would you say to her?
Um, well, I would say that follow your heart, tell the truth about who you are, uh, and you will find yourself being of service to the world. The Albert Schweitzer said something beautiful. I won't get it quite right, but he said, "The only ones of you who truly will be happy are those who've sought and found how to serve." And that's actually the truth, I think. Then at the same time, regarding money, you can be compensated for service. And it's important to know that it's out integrity to overserve and not be compensated for it. So to make sure that you're compensated for your service to the world in some way, in some cases it might be monetary, in other cases it might be exchange. And then third, it is important um, to know that at a certain point in your life, you will want to have um, a way to live that doesn't require you working, whether that's retirement or whether that's because of an illness or whether that's because of a set of circumstances. So it is important to create a viable but not over the top uh, place where you can save and invest in yourself and make sure you have that capacity to invest in yourself. Um, Not in a greedy way, but in a responsible way, in a way that is responsible and caring and authentic. So those are some ideas from my younger self.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So in the show, I call them heart flares, where your heart has like a message. Maybe I didn't ask you a question, or there's something that's just coming through you intuitively that you'd like to share with our beloved community and our listeners.
Yes, I would like to share that one of the things that we're looking very deeply at the organization that I'm very involved with called Pachamama Alliance, which is a work we do in the indigenous people in the rainforest, in the Amazon rainforest, is we're really looking at the misunderstanding of human supremacy. And all the supremacies, white supremacy, male supremacy, colonization, all of it begins with the misunderstanding of human supremacy. Um, and we're at work to create an evolutionary leap so we transform the dominant paradigm of human supremacy to human responsibility and sacred reciprocity with the earth, each other, and the community of life. So, in service of that statement, I invite you to spend time outdoors, even if it's snowy, even if it's a little bit cold, uh, and just give gratitude to the natural world for her bounty, her blessings, her incredible, unrelenting gifts to us. And really express your gratitude and appreciation for that as often as you can as we head towards the solstice, which is this Saturday, the shortest day of the year and the beginning of the return to more sunshine. Um, and use the solstice as a day of profound gratitude to the earth and all that she gives us.
It's so beautiful. And I know when this will air in early 2025, which is perfect, we can take that energy at any time and really use it for the year ahead, the decade ahead, our life ahead. Very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Last fun question for you. If you could have dinner with anybody, they're still alive, they're not, who would that be, Lynn, and why? Just a fun question. I always get a lot from this one. I started asking this more.
Um, If I could have dinner with anyone, let's see. Oh, there's so many cool people on this planet. Well, I knew and studied with Buckminster Fuller, and he died when I was a young woman, but I did get to know him, and I would love to have. He made predictions about this time in history, and I would love to have dinner with him now and see what he thinks about where we are now.
I would too. Side note, okay, if we could, the next time maybe we do another one, we'll call him in somehow. I'd love
Okay, perfect.
to. That will be the soul of, I don't know, dinner with Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. There are so many gems and pearls of wisdom here. And I just really, from my heart to yours, appreciate the work that you're doing at the global level. And of course, bringing it back to the very individual sacred level of each of ourselves. For everyone listening, we all have ways that we can shift this conversation through language, through the way we're speaking and being, that can make a huge change from consumer to citizen, to honor the sacred nature of Mother Earth, of the way we look at money and ourselves, and we can do something about it. Which reminds me of that myth, the third myth. We don't have to be resigned. This is part of why I was like, we must have this conversation. To me, there's so much empowerment here, and for everyone, I'm sure each person is going to come away. You're going to come away really inspired and moved, and hopefully moved into a new way of speaking and being and action.
Thank you. Well, it's been a joy talking with you, Julie, and I hope to see you someday soon in the flesh.
Me
We can hug.
too. Yes, a big hug, and maybe they'll be around too, who knows, but definitely in
Yeah.
person. And thank you. And I just want to thank our beloved, our listeners, wherever you are. May this conversation truly remind you of the divinity, your soul, your who you are. And as Lynn said, that you are this way. You don't have to do anything. It's just remembering and being that. So thank you. And thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Mwah.
Take care.
Hey, USU listener, my sisters and brothers near and far, I just wanted to pop in and say I'm so grateful to be part of your spiritual path. And I hope you loved this conversation with Lynn. My mind is still glowing. I did want to share with you, we talked a lot about shifting beliefs and really stepping into your power and your worthiness, and taking the time to breathe, to pause, to invest in your energy. And I am opening the doors this month to my 12th cohort of my intuitive life designer coach certification. It's a powerful experience. It's a 4-month opportunity and program to work with me live, my mentor coaches, and other of the students. If you're interested, I just want to give you a heads up because doors are going to be closing soon. We start January 30th. And you can find out more info at juliereisler.com/certification. This is our 12th cohort. It is a life-changing program. And much of what we talked about here, we dive into in how to really shift your beliefs about your own worthiness, your own self, and how to help others do that. So if you'd like to learn how to do this and create a beautiful, prosperous practice or business from anywhere in the world and be of service, this is definitely a path that can do that with coaching. And I hope if it's moving you at the soul level, you'll look into it. And if not, I just hope you got so much from this conversation. And as always, I'm sending my love to you.